Teachers, let's be honest. The end of the school year is almost as frustrating as the beginning, am I right? I mean, if you're not frantically trying to rehearse for that end of the year program, you're trying to assess your students, plan for Mother's Day and Father's Day events, field trips, and more. The very last thing teachers need at the end of the school year are more tasks piled on their already overflowing plates. In today's episode of Elevating Early Childhood, I'll be sharing 5 hacks preschool and even kinder teachers can use to lighten the load during this busy time. You see, recently I watched the viral Holderness Family Welcome to Maycember video, which is all about how busy parents are at the end of each school year. If you haven't seen it, go check it out because it is very funny and highly relatable. But when I showed it to my husband, who is not a teacher, he could not relate at all. You see, he thought the end of the school year would be a time for teachers to sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride to the finish line. Now, don't worry, because I set him straight. And I recited the endless list of things that teachers, especially in pre-K and K, have to do at the end of every year. So here is my own personal list, but if you have any ridiculous tasks that you have to do at the end of the year, if you're watching along on YouTube, leave them for me in the comments below. Oh, and it's also important to note that the things I'm going to list here are from a right-to-work state, which means there is no teachers union. I always get asked about that. So in early May, on my own campus and my own experience, teachers had to buy the end of the year festival food that the school would sell to make money for the school. Don't ask me how that makes any sense, but it's what happened. We also had to plan for those family things that happen at the end of the year, right? Usually these are things like Mother's Day and Father's Day or Important Persons Day, whatever you call it. And we also had to plan for the gift that children would give at each of these things. Those right there, those 2 things I've listed so far were a lot, right? Then you add onto that, start rehearsing. First you have to select a song or songs plural. Then you have to start rehearsing for the performance that was coming up. I also had to assess my students in the beginning of May. We got out at the end of May, so that's kind of the timeline there in case you're not on that same type of schedule. And then, of course, I had to serve on a committee because schools love their committees. And so I usually chose the Volunteer Appreciation Committee because it was the end of the year and I didn't have to think about it all year. And we also had very, very few volunteers, so I didn't have to plan for a lot of people. Sad but true. Towards the end of May, I had to fill out those report cards using the assessment data that I collected earlier in the month. I had to pack up my entire classroom. That's every single stick of furniture and pack away every single tool, toy, manipulative, whatever you want to call it. I had to push all the furniture against the wall. And make sure that the walls were spotless. There were absolutely no staples, holes, or anything like that, because my room was going to be used for summer school. So our entire campus was at the time, the summer school campus. And so I had to make it so that my room no longer existed. I also had to be sure that all my furniture that I stacked in the corner of the room or put into the corner was clearly labeled with whatever labeling convention my school came up with, whether that was the teacher's name. Some years they did that, other times it was the room number, just in case anything happened over the summer. And when they were cleaning, they would have to move things out and so forth because they had to wax the floors, right? Then there were the permanent records that had to be updated. So each child's permanent record had to be updated with all kinds of information and whatever, stuff, right? Stuff. Then we had to create classes for kindergarten. Yes, we were in charge of creating the classes for kinder by looking at all of our pre-K classes and seeing who would mix, who wouldn't mix well with each other and different needs and so forth, and then create equal classes for the kindergarten teachers. And last but not least, there was our end of the year duty. Each teacher had to take responsibility for packing up or whatever, something in the school that they had to do outside of their own classroom. And you would sign up for this duty. It was usually cleaning related. And let me tell you, just pro tip here, don't ever, ever, ever volunteer to clean the staff lounge on the last day of school, if you have one. I still have nightmares. I can't unsee the things I saw. It's gross. Now, I could go on, but I think you get the idea. Oh, and also, I know so many teachers out there who do field trips the last month of school. And those, in my opinion, at pre-K and K, are super stressful on the teacher because we are in charge of all the little bodies, getting them to and from, and managing the volunteers and the payment and. So super stressful. That's one reason why I didn't like having field trips at the end of the year, and we very rarely did because our district pretty much couldn't afford them. It's no wonder that Quit Talk is so popular right now. It seems that teaching now in today's day and age is so much more difficult than it's ever been before. So we have to work smarter, not harder, when it comes to maintaining our mental and physical well-being. So that brings me to those 5 hacks I mentioned. And hack number 1 is all about those elaborate end of the year graduation ceremonies or performances. You see, every single year since I created Pre-K Pages back in 2001, I get questions from teachers asking for help with planning these types of events, shall we say. And I get it. There are a lot of moving parts and pieces when it comes to these types of events that make so much extra work for teachers. But here's the thing, and I'm not going to win any popularity contests by saying this, but these types of events are just not necessary. They're not necessary for kids, and they're not necessary for teachers. And the reason I believe that, and I believe it so strongly, is that there's unrealistic expectations placed on teachers and students when it comes to these things. Now, if you're in a private school, their priorities may be different because parents are actually paying customers. So if you must have an elaborate graduation or performance at the end of the year, whether that's in public or private school, because the person who signs your paycheck says so, then allow me to make your teacher life easier with my done for you graduation kit. You see, this kit includes everything that you'll need to take the burden off of you and make this thing seem like more manageable and less stressful, right? So the first thing it has is a step-by-step planning guide. This is everything that you will need to think of when you are planning for your event. So basically, I'm going to hold your hand through the whole process, right? It also includes a song list because that is another question that comes up every single year. These are just songs that a lot of teachers like to use. I'm not saying I've used these songs, but there are a lot of teachers like to use these particular songs for whatever reason. Then there's the editable diplomas or certificates. So if you have a graduation, there is a set that says diplomas. If you don't and you just have a celebration, then there are certificates, right? Certificates of completion. So they're both in there for you. And the best part is that they're autofill. So all you do is type in your student's name and it will autofill each of the certificates or the diplomas with your student's name, the date, the school name. So all of those things are pre-populated in each one of the different certificates or diplomas. So super easy. I remember back in the day having to sit down the night before the day of the event and fill out and sign one of these things for each kid. And it was, because I had 44 kids, it was a lot of work. And this kit also includes a professionally written, done-for-you speech. That is the thing that strikes fear in the heart of a lot of teachers, because now you have to stand up in front of all the adults that have gathered. Sometimes you're on a stage, right? And you're looking out at the sea of faces staring at you. And public speaking may not be your strong suit. So what are the words that need to come out of your mouth? So you have a pre-written, done-for-you speech. There's also an editable template so that if you decide some of those words need to be changed for your particular situation, you can do that as well. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the link if you're watching along in the description box directly below this video. And if you're listening along, go to prekpages.com, type in graduation kit. Oh, and when it comes to the very last day of your ceremony or whatever it is that you're doing on that last day, if you're still trying to share photos with your parents on a CD or a DVD, stop. Just stop. Nobody owns those things anymore. A CD player or a DVD player, I haven't had one of those. A DVD player for 5 years and a CD player for longer than that, probably 10 years. So there's no need for those anymore. That's definitely working harder and not smarter. And if you use a parent communication app, which most teachers do these days, then there's no need for having that extra step because it's always a lot of work and time and effort to do that. So just let it go, like Elsa says. So that brings me to hack 2, and that's those elaborate Mother's Day events. You know the ones I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I am not sure when it became the teacher's responsibility to celebrate the parent of the child for the child. Like, how does that make any sense, first of all? It's become one of those we've always done it this way types of things that gets perpetuated every year. But if you're in the boat where you have to do this because the person who signs your paycheck says so, then allow me once again to take that burden off you with my done for you kits. And so here we have a Mother's Day version. It's not called Mother's Day, it's a VIP tea. And so you have like a tea party, right? If you will, it could be any important person. VIP stands for very important person. We also have one, if you want to use it as a Father's Day alternative, it's called Donuts with Dudes. And these also include invitations, right? Table tents. So if you want to have like little seating chart things, you can have those. You've got signs, you've got an RSVP, you've got an editable banner. All of the things that you need to pull off these events is included. So that brings me to hack number 3, which is elaborate Mother's Day or Father's Day gifts that kids make in the classroom. So it is such a source of stress and so time consuming. There are 2 rules that I believe all teachers should follow when it comes to doing these types of things in the classroom, if you must, because the person who signs your paycheck says so. They are not required. If that person didn't say so, they're not required. The 2 rules are, number 1, if it takes longer than 1 class period to make the thing, then don't do it. Remember our friend Nancy Reagan. And rule number 2 is if it takes you, the teacher, longer to prep and set up the thing that you're going to have the kids make, then again, channel your inner Nancy Reagan and say no. Instead, do something super quick and simple that uses materials you already have on hand in the classroom. One of my personal favorites is the thumbprint heart, right? And there is a picture on the screen and there is a link in the show notes to that. And it simply requires paper hearts, which you can use a die cutter for, or you can freehand them. That requires paper and scissors, and then some ink or some paint and the child's thumbprints and craft sticks. If you got those things, then you're good to go. You can take it a step further and get little cups and some grass to put in there too, but not necessary, and a photo of the child. Those are going to be the most cherished gifts that have a photo of the child in them. But wall calendars, forget that. Those are so 2008, right? No more. No more wall calendars that take 8 months to prep. No more. And listen, I can't even begin to tell you the number of times that I have heard teachers say, my gift that I had my kids make for the last 4 weeks, right, was accidentally thrown away by the custodian, or worse, right? Your dog ate it, you took it home in your trunk, and you got in a car accident and the car is in the impound lot or whatever. I've heard all of these things from teachers over the years. Why put yourself through that, right? Work smarter, not harder. So remember those 2 golden rules when it comes to parent gifts. Now, hack number 4 kind of goes with hacks 2 and 3, and that is elaborate gifts for your students, okay? And this one thankfully, is on the way out. I remember having 2 pre-K classes, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, for a total of, wait for it, drum roll, 44 students. If I had to buy something fancy or make something fancy for each of those 44 children, I would go bankrupt or be institutionalized, because that's just too much. But I will say it was very popular back then, and so I did do it, but I did it at a much smaller scale, a pencil for each child, and I also used to do the dollar Scholastic book, which makes me sad. RIP Scholastic dollar books. They no longer exist because of the economy and because just time marches on, right? But that's what I used to do. And so I basically would spend less than $50 on my 44 students. And still, that was too much, really, to be spending on my own class. Listen, here's the thing. Nobody ever said you have to give a gift to the students in your class on the last day of school. It's not written anywhere. It's not in your teacher contract if you have one. And it's certainly not a requirement of any school in this country. And the thing is, it doesn't make you a bad teacher if you don't do it. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. If you don't give your students a gift at the end of the year, it doesn't make you a bad teacher. So if you really want to do something for your kids that's very low key and very low prep, then I suggest using something like my memory book, right? So it only requires a single sheet of paper, 1 sheet per child for 10 days. So basically they get their crayons, they get their paper, and they're creating a memory book. And again, I think that's something that parents will cherish more than a pencil or any fancy gift that you could give or make for your kids. So I think that is something that's perfectly acceptable and that is easily doable with almost no prep other than making the copies. And again, if you're watching along, go to the description box below and a link to the memory book will be there for you as well. Oh, and just in case you haven't heard, remember those big summer packets that teachers used to send home with their students on the last day of school, in the hope of all hopes that children would use them to stop the summer slide or some miracle like that? Those are also on the way out. So if you want to stay current, ditch those paper packets. They're no longer a thing. They become completely obsolete, right? Because we know children will be on iPads or phones over the summer, right? So suggest some apps to parents instead. That's going to be more helpful and more doable for a lot of parents. Although they're very well intentioned, of course, these things are just a waste of time for teachers and a source of stress for families, not to mention a waste of paper. So again, be like Elsa and just let them go. So that brings me to hack number 5, which is field day. So if you're in a public school, you probably have some sort of field day at the end of the year. Now, it's more common in public schools than it is in private, but they're a huge source of stress for pre-K and kinder teachers because so many of the activities done on this day are not quite age appropriate and sometimes even downright dangerous for your little itty bitty students to deal with. So when it comes to field day and little kids, keep it very, very simple and age appropriate. So those would be things like blowing bubbles, parachute play, beanbag tossing. Those are going to be so much easier for your young kids to be successful with on field day instead of becoming frustrated or even injured in some cases. So simpler is better. So let's get real here for a minute. Some of these things we just talked about in this episode, things like graduation ceremonies or performances and Mother's Day and Father's Day events, these things are for the adults, right? They are not for the children. What they really are routine disruptors. What do we know about young children and routines? They crave their routine because they crave consistency. And when we disrupt their routine, what happens? The outcome is never good, right? Kids are going to act out when their routine is interrupted. So, saying, well, we're not going to really have school today. We're going to have a field day all day today. Whoa, you better look out, right? Kids are going to be like, what? I've never heard of, especially in the preschool level or pre-K level. They've never had a field day before. They don't know what it is. They just know it's 100% the opposite of what they're used to, right? They don't know about any of these things. And it's just a source of stress and discomfort for everybody involved. It is just for the adults. Do you see where I'm going here? This is a vicious cycle because I believe teachers should never be expected to do any of these things, whether the pressure is coming from administration, parents, or even your own colleagues. Now, before I forget, I have one last pro tip to share with you. On the very last day of school, cover all the tables in your classroom with white butcher paper and write in great big black letters in the middle, "Welcome." Then you give your kids some crayons, markers if you want, and let them go to town on these white pieces of paper on the tables, right? You'd be surprised how long they're engaged in this. Like just letting them write on the tables on this paper freely. My kids really enjoyed this activity. Then, when they're done, you take all the papers, put them together in one pile, roll them up, and store them safely over the summer. And then when you come back in the fall, unroll them when everyone else is worried about getting in their room to put up their bulletin boards and arrange their furniture. You just unroll these papers, put them up on the bulletin boards, and now you have backdrops for those first day of school photos that all the parents want to take, right? Super simple, super easy, less stress, and it benefits you again in the fall. So there you have it. If you want to stress less at the end of the school year, use these easy hacks. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward.